A black teen helps a Hell's Angel biker in the rain. Just a simple act of kindness. Or so he thought. But when that biker shows up the next day, everything changes. The teen's small favor pulls him into a world of roaring engines, buried pain, and second chances. The biker? A man haunted by guilt and running from a past he can't fix. The teen? Searching for hope in a world that's already written him off. Two souls who never should have met, brought together by a storm neither will forget. But as their bond grows, secrets surface, whispers of a crime, a broken family, and one act of hate that could destroy everything they've rebuilt. Now, kindness becomes the most dangerous thing he's ever given. Can a broken man and a lost boy really save each other before the past tears them both apart? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain came down in heavy sheets, hammering the cracked sidewalks of Atlanta. The streetlights flickered in the gray night, glowing dim through the downpour. Jamal Porter pulled his hood tighter over his head as he walked the long mile from the diner to his grandmother's house. His shoes squished with every step. His jacket, too thin for the weather, clung to his back. But the 17-year-old kept walking. It wasn't the first storm he'd faced. His backpack held a change of clothes and the tips from his shift, $13 and a few coins. He dreamed of saving up for an old car, anything to keep from walking miles in the rain. He'd already had enough of life feeling like one long uphill road. Then he saw it, a shape under the streetlight ahead. A motorcycle leaned sideways on the curb, its chrome dull from the rain. Beside it stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in tattoos. His long hair was plastered to his neck, and his leather jacket dripped water like a broken faucet. The man kicked at the wheel and cursed under his breath. Jamal hesitated. Everything his grandma ever told him echoed in his head. "You keep away from trouble, boy. Some folks ain't safe to help." But then the man bent over and groaned, gripping his knee like it hurt. His face, under the rough beard and anger, looked tired, lost. Before Jamal knew it, he was walking closer. "Sir, you okay?" he asked, raising his voice over the storm. The man looked up sharply, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Bike died? You got a tow number?" Jamal nodded quickly. "Yeah, my cousin works for one. I can call." He fumbled his cracked phone from his pocket, shielding it from the rain. The man stared, then gave a small nod. "Appreciate it." His voice was rough, deep, like gravel under boots. While Jamal waited for the dispatcher, he noticed how soaked the man was. His leather jacket clung to him, heavy and cold. Without thinking, Jamal handed over his own umbrella. "You need this more than me." The biker looked at him, surprised. "Kid, I'm fine." But Jamal pressed it into his hand. "You look freezing." The man finally took it. His hard expression softened a little. "You sure?" Jamal shrugged. "Yeah, my house ain't far." The tow truck came 20 minutes later. By then Jamal's hair was dripping, his breath puffing in the cold air. The man reached into his pocket like he wanted to tip him, but found nothing. Instead, he said quietly, "Thanks, kid. Not many stop for folks like me." Jamal smiled faintly. "My grandma says, if you see someone in the rain, God's testing your kindness. Guess I passed." The man chuckled, a low, rusty sound. "Guess you did." They exchanged a quick nod before parting. Jamal climbed into his old car parked nearby. His neighbor let him borrow it sometimes, and drove off toward home, headlights slicing through the storm. He felt oddly peaceful, like the night had changed something small but important. He didn't see what lay on the back seat until he pulled into his driveway. A black leather jacket, worn, heavy, with a patch on the shoulder that read, "Hell's Angels." Jamal's heart skipped. Man, he forgot this, he muttered, lifting it. Inside the lining, something jingled. 2 silver dog tags sewn carefully into the inner pocket, and an old, faded photograph of a smiling man, woman, and boy. He stared at it for a long time, the rain tapping on the car roof like impatient fingers. Whoever that man was, those tags meant something deep. Jamal carried the jacket inside, hanging it over a chair to dry. His grandmother, Mrs. Porter, looked up from her Bible as he entered. "You're soaked again, baby. What were you doing?" "Helping somebody," Jamal said softly, setting down the jacket. She frowned at the biker patch. "You be careful now. That kind of man, trouble follows him like smoke." Jamal nodded, though he wasn't sure she was right. Something in the man's eyes hadn't looked like trouble. It had looked like sorrow. That night, as Jamal lay in bed listening to the thunder roll across the sky, he couldn't stop thinking about him, the stranger in the rain. He wondered who he was, where he was going, and why his jacket carried the weight of a whole life inside it. Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving behind the soft patter of dripping leaves and the quiet hum of a city that never slept. Jamal closed his eyes, unaware that the man he'd helped was sitting alone in a motel miles away, staring at the empty space where his jacket should have been, and whispering the name stitched under the dog tags. "Tyler, my boy." Morning light slipped through the thin curtains and woke Jamal early. The house felt quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a long storm. He dressed fast, made oatmeal for himself and his grandmother, and checked that the biker's jacket had dried overnight. It hung heavy on the chair, the leather dull and old, but cared for. He lifted it and felt the small weight in the lining. The dog tags. He slid them out again, careful as if he were touching a memory. 2 simple pieces of metal, smooth from years of fingers rubbing them. He glanced at the faded photo tucked behind the seam. A man, a woman, and a boy with a gap-toothed smile. The man in the photo stood tall and proud. The woman leaned into him, happy. The boy grinned like the world was still all promise. Jamal tucked the tags and picture back into place. "I'll drop it at the diner's Lost and Found," he told his grandmother when she came into the kitchen, wrapping her robe around her shoulders. "If he comes by, he'll get it." She eyed the jacket patch and shook her head. "You hand it to him yourself if you can. A thing like that is not for a Lost and Found box." "I don't know where he is," Jamal said. "Then ask the Lord to bring him to you," she answered, simple and firm as she poured coffee. "And keep your eyes open." After breakfast, Jamal walked his little cousin Malik to school like he did most mornings. The rain had washed the city clean. Puddles held sky. Leaves shone. The air felt new. They laughed at the worms on the sidewalk and jumped the biggest puddles just for fun. At the school gate, he handed Malik his lunch bag and ruffled his hair. "Be good," he said. "I'm always good," Malik said, which made them both smile. Jamal turned to head for the bus stop, the jacket folded over his arm. That was when he heard yelling. On the side street near the school, 2 bigger boys had a smaller kid pinned against a fence, one gripping his backpack straps while the other poked his chest. "Give it," one said. "You got cash." The small boy shook his head, eyes wide. Jamal's feet moved before his thoughts. He hated that look, fear mixed with shame. He stepped between them and held up a hand. "Enough. Let him go." The bigger boy stared at him, confused, then annoyed. "Mind your business," one said. He wore a red cap pulled low. The other chewed gum like he owned the sidewalk. "My business is right now," Jamal said. He spoke calm and steady. "Walk away." For a second, no one moved. Then the boy in the red cap shoved him. Jamal kept his balance, his jaw tight, and did not shove back. He knew how fast things went wrong. He kept his hands open and low, palms out. "Walk, away," he repeated. The gum chewer snorted, but they stepped back with a few hard looks and a mumbled curse. They didn't want trouble in front of a school. The smaller boy grabbed his backpack, eyes shiny. "Thanks," he whispered, and ran toward the gate. A police cruiser turned the corner at that exact moment. The officer inside saw Jamal facing the two older boys, saw the biker jacket, saw the tension in the air, and made the wrong picture in his head. The car door popped open. "Hey, you three, hands where I can see them." Jamal lifted his hands at once. "Yes, sir," he said. The other boys did too, but sideways, ready to bolt. "What's going on?" the officer asked, stepping closer, eyes on Jamal. "Nothing, sir," Jamal said. "A kid was getting pushed. I stepped in, that's all." "Uh-huh," the officer said, doubtful. "And the jacket?" His gaze flicked to the Hells Angels patch like it shouted. "It's not mine," Jamal said, a little quick. "I'm returning it." The officer's mouth pressed into a line. He reached for his radio. "Officer?" a deep voice called from behind. "That jacket's mine." All four heads turned. The biker from the storm walked toward them across the wet pavement, hair tied back, beard still damp from a fast wash, eyes tired but clear. No leather jacket, no umbrella, just a plain gray hoodie and the weight of a man who had not slept. He lifted his chin. "He found it last night. I left it in his car by mistake." The officer looked between them. "You two know each other?" "We met in the rain," the biker said. "Kid helped me when nobody else did." He nodded once toward Jamal. "He's telling the truth." The two bigger boys used the moment to drift away. The officer glanced at them, but kept his focus on the man and Jamal. He seemed to weigh things in his mind, then exhaled through his nose and lowered his hand from the radio. "All right," he said. "Let's keep it calm by the school." "Yes, sir," Jamal said, relief loosening his shoulders. "Yes, sir," the biker echoed. The cruiser rolled on. The street felt quiet again. Jamal held out the jacket. "You left it in the back seat," he said. "I was going to drop it at the diner." The biker took it with both hands, like a man accepting a flag. He checked the inside pocket at once. His fingers found the sewn spot. The dog tags were still there. He closed his eyes for half a breath. When he opened them, they were wet around the edges, but steady. "Thank you," he said. "More than you know." "It looked important," Jamal said. "It is." The man's voice went softer. "My boy's tags." Jamal didn't ask the boy's name. He didn't need to. The weight in the man's voice told him enough. "I'm glad you got it back." The biker nodded. "Name's Bear," he said after a beat, as if offering it cost him something. "Rick, if you like, but everyone calls me Bear." "I'm Jamal," he said. Bear cleared his throat. "You headed to school?" "Yeah, after I get the bus." "Hop in," Bear said, thumbs pointing back toward an old pickup truck parked half a block away. "I owe you a dry ride." Jamal hesitated only a second. The officer's doubt still stung his skin, but Bear's face had no edge now. It held a kind of careful respect, like he was trying not to scare off a bird. "Okay," Jamal said. They climbed into the truck. The cab smelled like coffee, oil, and rain. Bear started the engine and pulled into traffic. For a while, they said nothing. Wipers thumped. Tires hissed on wet roads. The city slid by, brick storefronts, corner shops waking from sleep, a bus stop with a mother and child wrapped in one big scarf. "Thank you for speaking up," Jamal said at last. "Back there." "I should have come sooner," Bear said. "Been looking for that jacket since sunup. Motel's got thin sleep." He glanced at Jamal. "You handled those boys without swinging. That's hard." "I try not to make a mess," Jamal said. "My grandma says a calm word can stop a storm." "She's right," Bear said. The corner of his mouth lifted. "Not many listen." They reached the school. Bear pulled to the curb and put the truck in park. He dug into the pocket of his hoodie, then stopped. "I don't have much to pay you with," he said, "but I got something better than cash. You like engines?" Jamal looked at him. "I think so. I've never really worked on one." "I got a small garage on Fulton," Bear said. "Teach guys who need a second chance. If you want, swing by after school. I'll show you how to make an old machine breathe." He tore a scrap from a notepad and scribbled an address and number, the handwriting big and blunt. "No pressure. Doors open." Jamal took the paper and folded it into his wallet like a ticket he didn't want to lose. "Thanks." Bear drummed his fingers once on the steering wheel. "And kid, sorry about the cop. Folks see what they want. I saw what you did. That matters." "Thanks," Jamal said again, a little choked. He opened the door, then paused. "I'm glad you got your jacket back." "So am I," Bear said, his thumb rubbing the edge of the leather like a prayer. "See you around, Jamal." Jamal slid out and jogged towards the school, the bell already ringing. He felt the day tilt, not in a wild way, just a small shift like a gear finding its groove. He went to class, took notes, ate lunch with Melik, and felt his pocket every so often to make sure the scrap of paper was still there. After school, he took the bus home first. He found his grandmother in the front yard pulling weeds from the small flower bed. The sun warmed her back. She looked up at him with a question in her eyes, and he told her about the morning. The boys, the officer, the jacket, the ride, the invite. She listened without a single sound, face calm, hands resting on her knees. When he finished, she wiped her palms on her apron and stood. "You prayed for a door. Maybe this is it," she said. "But walk through it with care. Take your good sense with you." "I will," he said. She studied him for a long breath, then nodded toward the street. "Go on then. Daylight's wasting." Jamal checked the time. Late afternoon. If he hurried, he could make it to the garage before sunset. He slung on his backpack and started down the sidewalk, heart thumping with a mix of nerves and bright, stubborn hope. The storm had passed, but he still felt the rain inside him, the fresh kind that makes things grow. He headed toward Fulton, toward the address in his wallet, toward the sound of metal and work and maybe, just maybe, a new life beginning. The bus dropped Jamal off 2 blocks from Fulton Street. The address on the crumpled paper led him past small stores and a row of tired brick buildings until he spotted a weathered sign swinging above a garage door. Dalton Auto Repair. The letters were faded, but a hand-painted cross beside them looked new, as if someone had tried to start fresh. He hesitated at the curb. The air smelled of oil and metal. From inside came the clang of tools, bursts of laughter, and the hum of a compressor. Jamal wiped his palms on his jeans and stepped closer. A large man emerged from the open bay, wiping his hands on a rag. It was Bear, minus his jacket, wearing grease-stained overalls and a gray bandana tied around his head. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said, surprised but smiling under his beard. "You invited me," Jamal said, trying not to sound nervous. "Most kids say they will. Few do." Bear tossed the rag aside. "Come on in." Inside, the garage looked like controlled chaos. 3 cars sat on lifts. A couple of men, rough-looking but focused, worked side by side. One was tattooed from wrist to shoulder. Another had a small cross hanging from his ear. They looked up when Jamal walked in, curious but friendly. Bear noticed his unease. "Don't mind them. Ex-cons, like me," he said plainly. Good men, just trying to do better. Jamal nodded, unsure how to respond. Bear led him to a half-rebuilt engine on a workbench. Ever work with tools before? Not really. Good. No bad habits to break. Bear handed him a wrench. Loosen that bolt right there. Lefty-loosey. Jamal tried. The bolt resisted. He pressed harder until it gave with a loud creak. He grinned without meaning to. Bear chuckled. Feels good, doesn't it? Yeah, Jamal admitted. They worked together for hours. Bear showed him how to change oil, tighten belts, and listen for what he called the heartbeat of an engine. Between tasks, Bear told stories, some funny, some heavy. He talked about old biker days, about road trips that ended in fights and regrets. Jamal listened quietly, fascinated and saddened all at once. At one point, Bear's hand brushed his chest pocket where the dog tags rested. His eyes went distant. My boy used to hand me tools like that, he said softly. Tyler, smart as a whip, wanted to race bikes when he grew up. Jamal looked at him. What happened? Bear swallowed hard. He was 16, drunk driver. I wasn't there? Should have been. His voice cracked, rough from holding too much pain. Jamal didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Me too, Bear whispered. The sound of laughter pulled them back to the moment. One of the workers had told a joke about a missing wrench, and the mood in the shop lightened. Bear wiped his hands and looked at Jamal. You did good today, kid. Come back after school tomorrow if you want. I'll pay you something small. Jamal's face lit up. Really? Yeah, you've got good instincts. You listen, that's rare. Jamal smiled. Thanks, Bear. When the sun began to set, Bear gave him a ride home. The truck rattled but ran smooth, thanks to the kind of care that only a man who loves machines can give. As they drove through the orange light of dusk, Jamal asked, Why do you hire ex-cons? Bear gripped the wheel. Because nobody else will. I've been there. Spent time for assault after a bar fight. Most folks don't believe men like us can change. I'm trying to prove them wrong. That's cool, Jamal said. You're giving them a chance. Bear nodded. Guess I'm trying to earn mine too. When they pulled up outside Jamal's house, his grandmother was watering her flowers. She froze at the sight of the truck and the huge man stepping out of it. Her eyes narrowed. Evening, she said, polite but wary. Ma'am, Bear greeted her, removing his bandana respectfully. Your grandson's a good worker, sharp too. That's so, she said, glancing at Jamal. Yes, ma'am, Bear said. You raised him right. She softened a little but still frowned. I hope he's not getting into trouble. No, ma'am, Bear replied gently. Just learning honest work. When Bear drove off, she turned to Jamal. You sure about this, baby? He's not bad, Grandma. Just rough around the edges. Rough edges cut deep if you're not careful, she warned. I know, but I think he's trying to change. She sighed, shaking her head. The Lord sends lessons in strange packages. You be wise enough to open the right ones. That night, Jamal sat by his window, the street quiet and glowing with lamplight. His hands smelled faintly of oil, and for the first time, he didn't mind. He felt tired in a good way. Useful. Seen. Across town, Bear sat alone at the shop, lights dim, sipping cold coffee. He held his son's photo in one hand and looked at the empty spot on the bench where Jamal had stood. A small smile touched his lips. You'd have liked that kid, Ty, he murmured. The rain from the night before had dried up completely. In its place, a soft breeze drifted through the open bay door, carrying the scent of oil, steel, and something new. Hope, faint but real. By the next week, Jamal's routine had changed. School in the morning, the diner in the late afternoon, and the garage in the evenings. He started to look forward to the sound of clinking wrenches, the smell of oil, and Bear's deep voice barking, "Pass me the socket, kid." There was something steady about the shop, something clean in its purpose. For once, Jamal felt like he belonged, somewhere. The other men warmed up to him too. There was Marty, who used to fix engines in prison and whistled gospel songs while he worked. Luis, quiet but funny, taught Jamal how to spot a bad carburetor by the smell. They teased him good-naturedly, calling him college boy, because he did his homework on the workbench during lunch breaks. One afternoon, the garage's doorbell jingled. A woman walked in wearing scrubs, her dark hair pulled into a bun. She looked around the shop, taking in the grease-stained walls and the line of tired men under the lifts. When her eyes landed on Bear, her shoulders stiffened. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" Bear asked, voice low. "Checking to see if the rumors were true," she said. "You actually opened this place." Her tone was half disbelief, half hurt. Bear wiped his hands and tried to smile. "It's honest work." Sarah crossed her arms. "It's 20 years late." The air in the garage went still. Jamal looked from one to the other, feeling the tension rise like static. Sarah's face softened when she noticed Jamal watching. "And who's this?" "This is Jamal," Bear said. "Helps out after school." "Hi, ma'am," Jamal said quietly. She gave him a polite smile. "You must be one of his students." "Something like that," Jamal said. Bear cleared his throat. "You want coffee, Sarah? I can—" "No," she said quickly. "I just wanted to see it for myself." She turned toward the door, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm glad you're trying, Dad. I just don't know if it makes up for before." Bear's jaw clenched. "I know," he said softly. She nodded once and walked out. The bell jingled again, and the shop went silent except for the soft ticking of a cooling engine. Jamal finally spoke. "She's your daughter?" Bear nodded, staring at the floor. "She hasn't called me Dad in 10 years. "I'm sorry," Jamal said. "Not your fault," Bear muttered. "Mine." He picked up a wrench and started tightening a bolt that didn't need it. "You got family?" "My grandma," Jamal said. "She raised me." "You listen to her?" "When I can." Bear chuckled quietly. "Good. You got one up on me then." That evening, Bear drove Jamal home again. Mrs. Porter was waiting on the porch, a shawl over her shoulders. Her sharp eyes caught the truck before it even stopped. "Evening, ma'am," Bear said, stepping out and tipping his head respectfully. Mrs. Porter studied him for a long moment. "You're the biker," she said. "Yes, ma'am. The same one your grandson helped in the rain." Her lips pressed together. "I suppose I should thank you for giving him work." "You don't have to thank me," Bear said. "He's earning it." She folded her arms. "Still, I hope you're not bringing your old troubles to my doorstep." Bear's tone stayed gentle. "Trying not to, ma'am." She held his gaze, searching for something. Truth, maybe, or repentance. Whatever she saw made her ease just a bit. "All right," she said. "Then I'll pray for both of you." "Appreciate that," Bear said sincerely. After he left, Jamal lingered on the porch with his grandmother. The crickets were singing, and the street lamps glowed orange. "He's not what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" Jamal asked. "Anger, pride, but I saw regret in that man's eyes," she said. "That kind of regret comes from losing something you can't replace." Jamal nodded. He lost his son. Mrs. Porter closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a prayer. "Then maybe helping you helps him breathe again." Later that night, in a small bar on the edge of town, a group of bikers laughed loudly over bottles of beer. One of them, a thick man with scars across his knuckles, grinned when he saw Bear's shop name on a flyer pinned to the wall. "Dalton Auto, huh?" he said. "The big man's gone soft." Another biker, younger, laughed. "Teaching kids instead of riding with us?" The scarred man leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "Maybe it's time we remind him where he came from." Back at the shop, Bear sat at his desk, staring at an old photo of Sarah and Tyler on a camping trip, taken years before the accident. He ran his thumb across their faces. "Maybe I'm too late," he murmured. But when he thought of Jamal's grin as he fixed his first carburetor, something inside him whispered otherwise. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for either of them. Outside, the city lights glimmered, and a cool wind rustled through the trees. Two worlds had just collided, one built on broken roads and another on new beginnings, and neither man knew yet how much the other would change his life. The next few weeks moved in a rhythm that felt new, steady, almost peaceful. Every weekday, Jamal would finish school, grab a sandwich, and hurry to the garage. Bear would already be there, sleeves rolled up, radio humming old country songs, coffee growing cold beside a half-repaired carburetor. Jamal learned fast. He picked up the names of tools, learned to listen for the engine's voice, as Bear called it. At first, Bear barked orders like a drill sergeant, but as Jamal got better, he began to smile more, joke more. "You've got hands built for fixing," Bear said one afternoon, watching Jamal tighten a bolt with practiced ease. "Gentle, not scared to get dirty, that's rare." Jamal grinned. "Guess I just like seeing things come back to life." Bear looked at him for a moment and nodded. "Yeah, me too, kid." The shop's crew, Marty, Luis, and the others, had grown protective of Jamal. They ribbed him constantly, calling him baby mechanic or professor, but they also looked out for him. Marty taught him how to balance a tire. Luis taught him to feel when a wrench was about to slip. These rough men, once feared and forgotten, treated him like a younger brother. One day, while tightening an alternator belt, Jamal said, "You ever think people can really change, Bear?" Bear wiped sweat from his forehead. "You asking for you or me?" "Both, maybe." Bear chuckled. "Change ain't easy, but it's real. The hard part is believing you deserve it." He set his wrench down. "Most of us stop before we even start because we think we're too far gone." Jamal nodded. "My grandma says grace doesn't run out. It's just that we stop reaching for it." Bear smiled, that rare, deep kind. "Your grandma sounds like someone I should have met years ago." "You'd like her," Jamal said. "She'd make you cornbread and then give you a sermon." Bear laughed for the first time in a long time. The sound filled the whole shop and made even Marty look up from his work. "Kid, you keep talking like that, and you'll have me in church before long." "Would that be so bad?" Jamal teased. "Maybe not," Bear said, his eyes thoughtful. A few days later, Bear surprised Jamal by asking, "What's your Sunday like?" Jamal blinked. "Church, same every week." "Mind if I tag along this time?" The question shocked Jamal. "You serious?" Bear nodded slowly. "Can't promise I'll fit in, but maybe it's time I stop hiding from it." That Sunday, Bear showed up in jeans and a clean shirt that still smelled faintly of motor oil. Mrs. Porter nearly dropped her purse when she saw him standing at the church door. The congregation fell quiet as the giant biker walked down the aisle beside Jamal. Whispered voices followed, but Jamal kept his head high. The service was simple: hymns, prayer, and a sermon about forgiveness. Bear sat stiff in the pew, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the stained glass window. But when the choir sang Amazing Grace, something in him cracked, his throat tightened. He tried to hide it, but Mrs. Porter noticed and placed a hand over his. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Afterward, the pastor came to greet him. "Good to see a new face," he said kindly. "You fix cars, don't you?" "Yes, sir," Bear said, "trying to fix myself too." The pastor smiled. "We're all under construction." That broke the tension, and a few of the members even laughed. Later, Jamal and Bear stood outside, watching the children play in the yard. "You all right?" Jamal asked. Bear nodded. "Yeah, just been a long time since I felt welcome anywhere." "You are," Jamal said simply. Bear looked at him, eyes soft. "You know, kid, you remind me of my boy sometimes. Tyler had your same look, kind eyes, quick mind, always trying to help folks." Jamal's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he said again, though he'd said it before. "Don't be," Bear said quietly. "You can't change the past, but maybe you can change what it does to you." That evening, Bear invited Jamal and Mrs. Porter to dinner at a small diner on the edge of town. At first, Mrs. Porter refused. "I don't sit down with strangers." "Then come sit with a friend," Bear said gently. Something in his voice made her pause. At the diner, over fried chicken and mashed potatoes, they talked about everything. Old music, the best car brands, even faith. Bear told stories that made them laugh. Mrs. Porter, who had come prepared to judge, found herself smiling instead. When they finished eating, she said quietly, "Maybe you're not the man I thought you were, Mr. Dalton." "Trying hard not to be," Bear said. As they drove home later, Mrs. Porter whispered, "That man's got ghosts." "I know," Jamal said, "but he's fighting them." She nodded. "Then maybe God sent you to remind him he's not done yet." The next morning, the garage felt lighter. The men worked faster. There was laughter again. And for the first time in years, Bear hung a small wooden cross above his workbench. He didn't tell anyone what it meant. But when Jamal noticed it, he smiled quietly to himself. Sometimes the hardest lessons didn't come from books or sermons. They came from grease, sweat, and the stubborn grace of two broken souls helping each other heal. Spring came soft and green across the city. The air warmed, and the garage's doors stayed open from morning to evening. The steady rhythm of tools, laughter, and gospel radio spilled out onto the sidewalk, drawing curious neighbors. Jamal was there every day after school, his jeans always smudged with grease. Bear had promoted him from helper to junior mechanic, which meant he got his own toolbox and a real paycheck. Small, but his first honest one. When he handed the envelope to his grandmother, she teared up, pressed it back into his palm, and said, "You keep this, baby. Let it remind you what hard work builds." Bear had more customers now, mostly locals who liked the new shop energy. He made sure to charge fair prices, and he never let a car leave without checking that the driver was safe. Jamal saw how Bear treated everyone with respect, no matter who they were. One morning, while Jamal was polishing a finished hood, Bear walked in holding a stack of flyers. "Got an idea," he said, setting them down. "Free oil changes next Saturday for single moms, veterans, and anyone trying to get back on their feet." Jamal looked impressed. "That's a lot of oil, Bear." Bear grinned. "Grace costs something, but it's worth paying for." Marty and Luis overheard and clapped their approval. "I'll bring my cousins," Luis said. "They've been needing a hand." Word spread fast. By Saturday morning, the shop was buzzing with people. Cars lined up down the street, kids running around, music playing from a speaker someone brought. Jamal helped a young mother with her old minivan, showing her how to check her oil level. Bear moved from car to car, encouraging his men and making jokes that made everyone laugh. At noon, the local pastor stopped by, smiling at the sight. "This is something special, Mr. Dalton," he said. "You're serving more than engines today." Bear shrugged, but his eyes shone. "Just trying to give back." "Looks like God's giving through you," the pastor replied. Later, when the rush slowed, Sarah arrived carrying a cooler of sandwiches. She had heard about the event from a coworker. Bear froze when he saw her. "Didn't expect you," he said. "I didn't expect to come," she admitted. "But I heard you were helping people." Bear rubbed the back of his neck. "Trying to make up for some things." Sarah looked around. "Seems like you already are." They ate together on the tailgate of Bear's truck. Jamal joined them, and conversation came easier than before. Sarah asked about Jamal's plans, and he told her about his dream of becoming a certified mechanic. "Bear says I could run my own shop one day," he said. Sarah smiled. "I believe it." Then, turning to her father, she added softly, "You're good with him. I haven't seen you care about something in a long time." Bear's throat tightened. "He reminds me of your brother. Only this time I'm not messing it up." Sarah reached out and touched his arm briefly. "Then keep doing what you're doing." That night, after everyone went home, Jamal stayed behind to help clean. "You okay?" he asked as they swept up oil-stained rags. Bear nodded slowly. "Yeah. That was the first time Sarah's stayed longer than 10 minutes. She'll come around," Jamal said. Bear smiled faintly. "Maybe? You sure you ain't secretly a preacher? You always sound like one?" Jamal laughed. "Nah, just listening to my grandma too much." The days that followed built on that small miracle. The garage gained attention from the local paper. A reporter wrote a story titled, "Ex-Biker Helps Rebuild More Than Cars." Neighbors began to see Bear not as a thug, but as a man trying to make amends. Jamal's confidence grew too. With Bear's encouragement, he applied to a technical training program for young mechanics. When the acceptance letter came, he ran straight to the garage. "I got in," he shouted, waving the paper. Bear grinned wide and pulled him into a bear hug that nearly crushed him. "Knew you would, kid. You've got hands of gold." "I couldn't have done it without you," Jamal said. Bear shook his head. "Nah, you did this. I just handed you the wrench." To celebrate, Sarah invited them both to dinner at her apartment. The three of them sat at her small kitchen table, sharing spaghetti and laughter. For the first time in years, Bear felt like family again. On the way home, Bear said, "You realize what you've done, right?" "What?" Jamal asked. "You didn't just fix engines, you fixed people?" Jamal smiled. "Guess we're both doing that." Bear nodded, his eyes soft with pride. "You're the best thing that's happened to this old fool in a long time." But as the night deepened and Bear parked the truck, a shadow crossed his mind. A reminder that peace never stayed long in his world. In a bar across town, Rex Matthews was staring at that same newspaper article, his fist tightening around a beer bottle. "So Dalton wants to play saint," Rex growled. "Let's see how holy he feels when we pay him a visit." Back at home, Jamal slept soundly, unaware that the next storm was already brewing on the horizon. The next morning dawned bright, but there was a heaviness in the air that neither Bear nor Jamal could explain. The garage opened as usual, radio humming, wrenches clinking, laughter rising from the men at work. But Bear's mood was different. He kept glancing toward the street every few minutes, eyes sharp, as if waiting for something to appear. "Something wrong?" Jamal asked, handing him a wrench. Bear paused. "Just a feeling. Sometimes you can smell trouble before you see it." Jamal frowned. "Like smoke before a fire?" Bear gave a short nod. "Exactly." By noon, the unease had spread through the crew. The day ran quietly. Too quietly. Even Marty, usually full of jokes, kept his head down. Around mid-afternoon, Bear stepped outside to grab a part shipment. That's when he saw it. A motorcycle parked across the street, its chrome glinting in the sun. A figure leaned on it, helmet on, watching. Bear's stomach dropped. He knew that posture. Rex Matthews. Bear froze for a second before calling out, "You lost, Rex?" The man smirked and pulled off his helmet, revealing a scarred face and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Nah, brother. Just taking a little trip down memory lane." "This isn't your lane anymore," Bear said flatly. Rex swung a leg off his bike, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. "Still got that temper, huh? Relax, I just came to say hi." He looked around the garage, noticing Jamal standing near the door. "And who's this? New recruit? Didn't know you were running a charity for lost kids." Jamal stiffened, but Bear stepped between them. "You talk to me, not him." Rex's smirk widened. "I see how it is. Trading your brothers for strangers. Real noble." "Get out, Rex," Bear said quietly. Rex leaned in close. "You think you can wash off where you came from? Newsflash, Dalton, you can't." He brushed past Bear's shoulder and walked back to his bike, laughing low. "Nice shop you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it." The engine roared to life, and he sped off, leaving the air thick with exhaust and tension. That evening, Bear stayed late, pacing the floor after everyone had gone. Jamal refused to leave. "Who was that?" he asked. "An old mistake," Bear muttered. "Rex and I used to ride together. He doesn't like seeing me clean up." "Why would he care?" "Because I walked away," Bear said. "And he never did." He rubbed his forehead. "Men like him think loyalty means staying in the dirt with them. When you climb out, they feel betrayed." Jamal nodded slowly. "You think he'll come back?" Bear didn't answer. He didn't have to. 2 nights later, his fears came true. Jamal arrived early the next morning to find the garage door half open and glass glittering on the ground. His stomach turned cold. Spray paint covered the walls, crude words, hateful slurs, and a red X across the sign. Tools were scattered, and one of the cars had a shattered windshield. "Bear!" he shouted, running inside. Bear emerged from the office, eyes red, fists trembling. "Don't," he said hoarsely. "Don't touch anything. I called the cops." Jamal's chest burned with anger. "Who did this?" Bear's voice was tight. "Rex, him and his crew." The police arrived within minutes, taking photos and notes. Jamal stood aside, jaw clenched. One officer looked at the graffiti and frowned. "Any idea why they targeted you?" Bear hesitated. "Old grudges." When the officers left, the shop was quiet again. Jamal turned to Bear. "You can't let him get away with this." Bear shook his head. "If I go after him, I lose everything I've built. That's what he wants." "But I said no, Jamal," Bear snapped, then sighed, instantly regretful. "I'm sorry, kid, I just—" He looked around the ruined shop. "Feels like no matter how much I change, the past keeps coming back to wreck it." Jamal placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we fix it again. We always do." Bear stared at him, the anger softening into something like pride. "You've got more faith than I ever did." That night, as they boarded up the broken window together, headlights flashed outside. A group of bikes slowed, revved their engines, and disappeared into the darkness. "They're trying to scare you," Jamal said quietly. Bear nodded. "And it's working." He looked down at his grease-stained hands. "But not enough to stop me." The next day, Bear filed a report at the station. But when the police found Rex at a local bar, the man spun the story around, claiming Bear had threatened him first. That evening, a patrol car pulled up outside the garage. "Rick Dalton?" the officer called. Bear stepped forward. "Yeah? You're under arrest for disturbing the peace and assault." Jamal's mouth fell open. "What? That's not true!" Bear lifted his hands calmly. "It's all right, kid. Don't make it worse." He glanced at Jamal with tired eyes. "Just keep the shop safe, you hear?" Jamal watched helplessly as they led Bear to the car. Cameras flashed from across the street. A local news crew appeared out of nowhere, shouting questions. By evening, the story was everywhere. Ex-biker arrested after violent clash. At home, Mrs. Porter held Jamal's hand as he stared at the TV, heart sinking. "People love to see a man fall," she murmured, "but truth don't stay buried forever." "I can't let them ruin him," Jamal said. "He's not who they say he is." Mrs. Porter's eyes softened. "Then prove it, baby. With light, not anger." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, echoing like a promise. The next few days felt like winter had returned, even though spring sunlight still glowed through the trees. The garage was locked up, quiet as a tomb. Jamal stood in front of it after school, staring at the boarded windows and the spray-painted scars that no one had yet washed away. The laughter, the music, the smell of oil and hope, all of it was gone. Bear was sitting in the county jail. The news hadn't been kind. The reporters used old photos of him in biker gear, tattoos and all, with captions that said things like, "Local mechanic with criminal past arrested." No one talked about the free oil change day. No one mentioned the kids he'd helped or the lives he'd repaired. They only talked about who he used to be. Jamal felt the sting of it in his own life, too. At school, whispers followed him down the hall. "Hey, isn't that the guy who worked with that biker? He probably helped trash that shop." Even his teachers gave him uneasy looks. Worse still, the training program that had accepted him called the house that evening. His grandmother answered. Jamal heard her voice grow quiet. "I see. Thank you." She hung up, then looked at him with eyes full of sadness. "They're putting your application on hold. Pending review," they said. Jamal stared at her. "Because of Bear?" She nodded softly. "People don't like shadows near light, baby, even if they're wrong about where the shadow came from." Anger rose in Jamal's chest, hot and sharp. "That's not fair. He didn't do anything wrong." "I know," she said, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "But shouting won't clear his name. Truth takes patience." That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, watching rain start to fall again. The steady tapping against the glass felt like the same storm that had started everything weeks ago. But this time, it wasn't a night of beginnings. It was a night of loss. He thought about Bear sitting alone in a cold cell, about the way he used to hum while fixing engines, about the pride in his eyes when Jamal got accepted to the program. Jamal couldn't let it end like this. The next morning, he skipped the bus and walked to the police station. His hands shook as he approached the front desk. "I'm here to see Rick Dalton," he said. The officer frowned. "Family only." "I'm his apprentice," Jamal said quickly. "Please, just for a minute." The officer hesitated, then sighed. 10 minutes. When Jamal stepped into the visitation room, he saw Bear behind the glass. Tired, scruffy, his broad shoulders slumped, like the weight of the world was on them. But when he saw Jamal, he managed a small smile. "Kid," he said through the phone receiver, "you shouldn't be here." "Where else would I be?" Jamal replied. "They said you hit that guy. Tell me it's not true." "It ain't," Bear said firmly. "Rex set me up. He came by my place drunk, mouthing off. I told him to leave. He must have called it in before I could even blink." "They're saying you started it," Jamal said. Bear's eyes went dark. "Yeah, people love a good villain. Makes their world feel smaller." I'll tell them what really happened, Jamal said. Bear shook his head. No, you stay clear of Rex and his gang. Promise me that. But, no buts, kid. I made my own messes. I'll clean this one too. You just keep your head down. Jamal's voice cracked. What about the shop? Bear looked away. Maybe it's time to let it go. The words hit like a hammer. No, Jamal said. You built that place to change lives. You changed mine. You can't let them take that from you. Bear stared at him for a long moment, then sighed, the fight in his eyes dimmed by weariness. You got more faith than I do. Then I'll believe enough for both of us, Jamal said quietly. Before Bear could reply, the guard announced, Time's up. Jamal stood, pressing his hand to the glass. Don't give up, Bear. Bear placed his hand against Jamal's through the glass pane, a rough mirror of strength and despair. I'll try, kid. For you. That night, Jamal went to the garage. The air smelled like dust and burnt rubber. He turned on a single work light and began sweeping the floor, one section at a time. It wasn't about cleaning. It was about refusing to let the place die. He picked up a photo that had fallen off the bulletin board, a picture from the free oil change day. Bear was laughing, Sarah beside him, and Jamal in the corner with grease on his cheek. He wiped the frame clean, his chest tightening. You're coming home, he whispered, even if I have to bring you myself. At home, his grandmother waited at the kitchen table, Bible open. She looked at the dirt on his shoes but said nothing for a long time. Then, gently, You still believe in him? With everything I've got, Jamal said. She nodded slowly. Then fight with faith, not fists. God didn't bring that man into your life for no reason. Jamal sat beside her, resting his head in his hands. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, she said. It always finds a way to rise. The next morning, Jamal began making calls. To Sarah, to the pastor, even to Marty and Luis. If the world wanted to forget what Bear had done right, then Jamal would remind them. He didn't know yet how to fix everything. But as sunlight streamed through the window and hit the old photo he'd cleaned, he made himself a promise. He would rebuild what hate had broken. He would find a way to bring Bear home. And he wouldn't stop until he did. Jamal woke early the next morning, his mind already spinning with plans. He hadn't slept much, but he didn't care. Hope, faint and fragile, had started to bloom again inside him. After breakfast, he put on his cleanest shirt and caught the city bus across town to the hospital where Sarah worked. The building smelled of disinfectant and coffee, the kind of place where people carried both pain and miracles in equal measure. Jamal waited until she finished her rounds, then caught her by the nurse's station. She turned, surprised. Jamal? What are you doing here? I need to talk to you, he said quickly. About your dad. Her expression changed. Weariness clouded her eyes. If it's about his arrest, I already know. I'm sorry, but I can't. He didn't do it, Jamal interrupted, voice firm. Rex set him up. He told me what happened. Sarah crossed her arms. You think I haven't heard that before? My dad's been saying it's not my fault, since I was a kid. This time it's true, Jamal said. He's not that man anymore, Sarah. You should have seen how he was at the garage. He helped people, really helped them. He changed lives. Sarah's jaw tightened. You sound just like him. I guess he's rubbed off on me, Jamal said softly. She hesitated, looking at him for a long moment. The anger in her face slowly gave way to uncertainty. You really believe he's innocent? I know it, Jamal said, and if you still care about him, even just a little, he needs you right now. Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. You're asking me to trust him again. I'm asking you to give him a chance, Jamal said. He gave me one when nobody else would. For a long time, Sarah didn't speak. Then she picked up her phone and whispered, "What jail is he in?" Jamal exhaled in relief. "Fulton County." That evening, Sarah visited her father. Jamal didn't go. He didn't need to. He waited at the garage instead, sweeping the floors again just to keep his hands busy. Inside the visiting room, Bear looked up as Sarah walked in. For a heartbeat, neither said anything. "I wasn't sure I could come," she said, sitting down. "I didn't expect you to," Bear admitted. "You've got every right to stay away." She studied him. "You look tired." "Feels like old ghosts came to visit," he said, "but maybe they just came so I'd finally face them." "Did you really not start that fight?" she asked quietly. He met her eyes. "I swear, Sarah, I told Rex to leave. He threw the first punch, but I didn't swing back." Tears filled her eyes. "You used to say that a lot, Dad." "I know," he said, voice breaking. "But I mean it this time. I'm not that man anymore." He leaned forward, desperate but calm. "I was trying to make things right. For you. For Tyler." Sarah's hand trembled. Then she reached across the table and took his. "I believe you," she whispered. "For the first time in a long time, I actually believe you." Bear's breath hitched. He bowed his head, tears falling onto their joined hands. "Thank you," he said softly. When visiting hours ended, Sarah promised to help clear his name. "You focus on getting through this," she told him. "We'll fix the rest together." That night, she met Jamal outside the garage. He was sitting on the curb with a sandwich and a soda, looking worn but hopeful. "She came?" he asked, before realizing who stood beside him. "She did," Sarah said, smiling faintly. "And you were right. He's changed." Jamal grinned, relief washing over him. "Told you." Sarah sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "So what now?" "We clear his name," Jamal said. "But we'll need help. The community loved that shop. If we remind them what it stood for, they'll stand with us." Sarah nodded slowly. "You're talking about a fundraiser?" "Yeah," Jamal said. "Something big. Something that says Bear's not done." They spent the next few days planning. Jamal contacted the pastor, Marty, Luis, and everyone who had ever walked through the garage's doors. Sarah reached out to her co-workers at the hospital. They made flyers, called local businesses, and spread the word online under a simple name, Rebuild with Bear. At first, only a few people responded. But then the story began to travel. The same news outlets that had called Bear a criminal now reported on a community's effort to help a fallen man who once helped them. One morning, Jamal opened his phone and stared at the headline. "Look at this," he said to Sarah, who was sitting across from him at the diner. "They're saying donations already hit 5,000. Sarah smiled. "It's working." Jamal looked out the window, where the sun shone bright and clean. "He's coming home soon," he said with conviction. Sarah followed his gaze. "You really think so?" "I don't just think so," Jamal said. "I believe it." The seed of hope had taken root, and this time, it wasn't going to die. In his cell that same evening, Bear sat with his back against the wall, humming softly. A guard approached, holding a letter. "For you." Bear opened it. Inside was a photo. Him, Jamal, and Sarah at the free oil change day. On the back were 4 words, written in neat handwriting. "We're rebuilding with you." Bear pressed the photo to his chest, eyes glistening. For the first time in weeks, he whispered a prayer, not for forgiveness this time, but for gratitude. The day of the fundraiser dawned clear and golden. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and hope. Jamal was already at the garage lot before sunrise, hammering together folding tables and hanging banners that read, "Rebuild with Bear." Heart thudded with excitement and nerves. For weeks, he and Sarah had worked day and night to make this happen, calling businesses, posting flyers, talking to neighbors, asking for donations. By 8 o'clock, cars started to line up down the block. The same people who once whispered about Bear's past now came carrying boxes of food, toolkits, and folded bills. The pastor from their church brought a sound system. Marty and Luis set up a grill. Even kids from the high school showed up to help wash cars for donations. As the crowd grew, Jamal stood on a small wooden crate, calling out directions. "We've got coffee inside. Tool raffle starts at noon. Every penny goes toward rebuilding Dalton Auto Repair." His voice cracked a little, but no one seemed to mind. Sarah arrived soon after, wearing jeans and a bright red shirt that read, "Grace Builds Again." She hugged Jamal. "You did it," she said, smiling through misty eyes. "We did it," Jamal corrected. By mid-morning, a local news van pulled up. The same reporter who once called Bear a dangerous ex-biker stepped out with a camera crew. Jamal's stomach clenched, but this time he didn't back away. The reporter held out a microphone. "You're the young man who worked with Rick Dalton, right?" "Yes, ma'am," Jamal said, standing tall. "Why do you believe he deserves this kind of support?" Jamal took a deep breath. "Because people can change," he said simply. Bear gave second chances to men nobody else trusted. He believed that what's broken can be fixed. Cars, people, all of it. And he's proved it every single day since I met him. We're not rebuilding a shop. We're rebuilding hope. The reporter blinked, caught off guard by the boy's quiet conviction. "Thank you," she said softly. The crowd clapped, and Jamal stepped down, cheeks flushed but heart full. He caught Sarah's proud smile across the lot. Then, near noon, a black truck turned the corner and slowed to a stop beside the lot. The crowd's chatter dimmed. Jamal froze, his heart leaping into his throat. The door opened, and Bear stepped out. He looked different, lighter somehow, his beard trimmed, his eyes clear. He wore clean jeans and a plain gray shirt, the sun glinting off the silver dog tags at his neck. For a second, the entire lot went silent. Then someone shouted, "Welcome home, Bear!" and cheers erupted. Bear's eyes shone as he looked around. "What's all this?" he asked, voice thick with disbelief. Sarah rushed forward and hugged him. "This," she said, "is your second chance." Jamal followed, grinning so wide it hurt. "Told you we'd fix it." Bear looked around at the banners, the tables, the faces of neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid him. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I don't deserve this." Jamal shook his head. "Nobody does. That's what makes it grace." Bear laughed through tears, pulling Jamal into a hug so tight it nearly lifted him off his feet. "You saved me, kid," he whispered. "You really did." That afternoon, the event turned into a celebration. The music blared, the grill smoked, and stories flowed. Funny stories, sad ones, stories of how Bear had helped fix cars for free or taught men fresh out of prison how to work with their hands. People dropped money into buckets faster than Jamal could count. The reporter returned for one last interview. This time she pointed the camera at Bear. "How does it feel to see your community standing behind you?" Bear cleared his throat. "Feels like forgiveness," he said simply. "I spent a lot of years breaking things, trust, hearts, myself, but this young man here showed me something. You can't outrun who you were, but you can outlove it. That's what we're doing here today." The crowd applauded again. Sarah wiped tears from her cheeks. By sunset, the lot was lit with strings of lights. The donation total had tripled what they'd hoped for. The pastor stood on the makeshift stage, microphone in hand. We started today with one goal, to rebuild a garage. But we're ending it by rebuilding a man's faith, and maybe even our own." Bear stepped forward to thank everyone, but his voice broke halfway through. Jamal took the microphone and finished for him. "This place," he said, "is more than a shop. It's proof that love can do what hate never could. It can fix what's broken." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping their eyes. As the music resumed, Bear looked at Jamal and Sarah standing beside him. "Guess I've got work to do," he said. Sarah smiled. "And this time, you're not doing it alone." When the lights finally dimmed and the crowd drifted home, Bear and Jamal stood together in the quiet. The lot was messy again, empty cups, folded tables, but to them, it looked beautiful. "Think it's enough to reopen?" Jamal asked. Bear put a hand on his shoulder. "It's enough to start, and starting's what matters." The breeze carried the scent of smoke and food and spring flowers. For the first time in months, Bear didn't feel haunted. He felt whole. They stood there as the stars came out, side by side, the boy who had given help in the rain and the man who had finally learned what it meant to receive it. The next few months passed like sunrise after a long night. The garage stood bright and new again, fresh paint, clean tools, and laughter echoing off its walls. The sign above the door read proudly, "Bear and Jamal's Garage, fixing lives one engine at a time." Jamal worked beside Bear every day, both of them busier than ever. Sarah came by often, bringing lunch and smiles, her relationship with her father slowly mending with every visit. Mrs. Porter stopped by too, carrying her cornbread and quiet wisdom. She looked around, nodding in approval. "Grace built this place," she said softly. The men Bear once mentored returned, volunteering to help train new apprentices, young folks who needed the same second chance Bear once gave them. The air always smelled of oil and redemption. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Bear and Jamal stood outside watching cars glide by. The world felt peaceful again. "We did it, kid," Bear said quietly. "No," Jamal replied with a smile. "God did. We just turned the wrench." Bear chuckled, his heart full. For the first time in years, his hands, once instruments of anger, had become hands of healing. And that, he knew, was the real miracle. A year later, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the high school gym, casting soft gold across rows of proud families. Balloons bobbed overhead, the hum of excitement filling the air. Jamal stood backstage, adjusting his graduation gown with trembling hands. He glanced out at the crowd. Mrs. Porter sat near the front, smiling wide and wiping her eyes. Beside her sat Sarah, holding Bear's arm. The old biker looked awkward in a clean button-down shirt, his beard trimmed neat, his expression full of pride. When Jamal's name was called, the applause was deafening. He stepped to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "The night I stopped to help a biker in the rain, I thought I was saving him," he said. "But really, God was saving us both. That one small act of kindness changed everything. It taught me that people can start over, that forgiveness can fix what hate breaks, and that family isn't about blood. It's about love that stays." The gym erupted in cheers. Bear stood and clapped the loudest, tears glinting in his eyes. Mrs. Porter whispered, "Thank you, Lord," under her breath. After the ceremony, Bear met Jamal outside by the curb, his motorcycle gleaming in the sun. He handed Jamal a spare helmet. "You ready, partner?" he asked, grinning. Jamal smiled, eyes shining. "Always." The engine roared to life as they rode off into the evening light. Mentor and student, father and son in spirit, proof that grace could turn strangers into family and storms into miracles. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.